In 1977, NASA launched the Voyager mission with two twin spacecraft designed to cross into interstellar space and peer at our solar system from the outside. 13 years later, on February 14th, 1990, Voyager 1 snapped this photo of Earth from 3.7 billion miles away. Let's wait until that photo comes up. There it is. The photo has come to be known as the pale blue dot. It's still loading, that picture. That's all right, we're patient. That term, the pale blue dot, was a term coined by astronomer and author Carl Sagan in his reflections on the photograph's significance, documented in his 1994 book of the same name. The image shows a tiny speck all on its own, surrounded by nothing in the vast universe. In the photograph, Earth's apparent size is less than a pixel. The planet appears as a tiny dot against the vastness of space, among bands of sunlight reflected by the camera. At the time this picture was taken, there was political turmoil here on Earth as the former Soviet Union grappled with presidential elections and ultimate dissolution, ushering in a new world order and the end of the Cold War. This image of our lonely planet provided some much-needed perspective on our human condition. Today, as political unrest, a financial crisis, and a global pandemic threaten our nation and our planet, the image and the ideas it evokes are still just as relevant. In his 1994 book, Carl Sagan comments on what he sees as the significance of this photograph, writing, "Look at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every parent, every hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena," Sagan continues. "Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of that dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of that pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by that point of pale light. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits," Sagan writes, "than this distant image of our tiny world." Friends, for me, for so many of us, this has been a difficult week filled with such a rush of emotions and concern for our corner of that pale blue dot. This feels like another moment of turmoil, like that moment 30 years ago when a spacecraft passing Neptune turned around to glance back at us. The turbulent and surreal and yet somehow to be expected events in Washington, D.C. this past Wednesday are seared in my brain. There was the moment when the President of the United States at a rally, in tweets and in a video from the White House, doubled and tripled down on his months-long incitement to violence. And the moment when white, insurrectionist terrorists, some armed, some wearing anti-Semitic and white supremacist garb, stormed the Capitol building. And then, when finally confronted 4 hours later by sufficient law enforcement, almost all of them walked freely back out of the building as if they had done nothing wrong. And the moment when more than 1/4 of the legislative branch of our government decided not to recognize the legitimately elected next president of the United States. At each of these moments, my heart broke a little. I felt angry and scared and frustrated and helpless, and then angry and scared and frustrated and helpless on a loop, like the loop of images that cable news kept cycling through every few moments. There were the images of our elected officials cowering in fear in the chambers of the House and the Senate. There was the image of 4 brave female congressional staffers grabbing and protecting the boxes holding the Electoral College certificates the lawmakers had moments before been in the middle of counting. And there were the images of senators and congresspeople returning to their chambers to finish what they had started just 2 hours after the end of the seditious attack on the Capitol. Photos can be so powerful, so emotionally evocative. A photo captures a moment in time, freezing it for future generations to see, to remember, and to try and understand what that moment signified. Candace Hansen, a planetary scientist at NASA, who was part of the team behind the pale blue dot image, said just last week that one of the messages that resonated with her at the time was how alone we are, that it's just us out here. If we screw up our planet, we're screwing up ourselves, Hansen said. We don't have another option. There's no plan B. We really need to take care of this world. Back then and now, she added, it's kind of the same message. This is a moment of choice, my friends, as helpless as we might all feel. What will the photos from Wednesday say about us when people look at them in 2051, 30 years from now? That story has not yet been written. We begin to write it today. There's a version of the story that history books will recall after they tell of what led up to that moment on Wednesday. The theme of this version goes like this. That was the day that American democracy began its downward spiral. That was the day that hatred in our nation, hatred that long preceded the presidency of Donald Trump, was exposed violently and was violently and intentionally turned against the core institutions of the United States, never to recede. The prophet Jeremiah, living in his own troubled time in the 6th century BCE, asked the question, is there no balm in Gilead? In this ending of the as yet unwritten story, the events of January 6th, 2021, and the response of the people of America in the weeks, months, and years to follow made it clear that the answer to Jeremiah's question was no. There was no balm to the hate and rage that had been allowed to fester in that once great nation, that always imperfect but always striving union. So goes one version of the story those images will elucidate for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. In this telling, those photos show us the beginning of the end. But there is another story that historians and philosophers and poets might write about what those pictures signify. It's a version that, to be honest, right at this moment, feels about 3.7 billion miles from likely. In this other version of the story, chroniclers will say that that was the moment that Americans realized that there is no plan B. That was the moment that Americans chose as one to choose a different path. That was the moment that Americans chose to see their commonalities as greater than their differences. That was the moment that Americans began to hear and understand and rejoice in the capacity for human goodness and human kindness and human decency in all of America's citizens. And that was the moment that Americans decided to not only decry, but to work relentlessly to end dehumanization and violence, to stop standing idly by while our neighbors bleed, to cease being silent in the face of wrongdoing and evil and injustice. That was the moment, historians might write, that slowly, painstakingly, often with 2 steps backward to every step forward, America began to live up to its creed that all are created equal, that all are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That version of the story feels elusive at best right now. I know. It doesn't seem possible. Right now, at this exact moment, it feels safer to assume that the 50 people who will begin to sit on one side of the aisle of the Senate on January 22nd will never understand the 50 people who sit on the other side of the aisle. It feels safer to bet that people cannot change, that we are who we are. Some are built to love, and some are built to hate. But we Jews are people of hope. We are inheritors of a faith tradition that audaciously asserts that the world as it is doesn't have to be this way. My friends, this is not a kumbaya sermon. This is not a, why can't we all just get along sermon either. This is not, I assure you, a, I'm sure everything will be fine, don't worry about it sermon. Tonight, I stand here in fear and trembling. Perhaps you do too. But I also stand here knowing that our grandkids and our great-grandkids and generations yet to be will look back at this moment in American history, at this moment in human history. And we have to decide what we want them to see when they, like Voyager 1, look back as they leave our orbit. And here's the thing. No matter how you feel right now, no matter how I feel right now, no matter how we as a nation feel, we do have a decision to make about what story they will tell, what impressions those photos will make on them 30 years hence. This pale blue dot is the place where every love and every hate, every moment of exaltation and every moment of human degradation has ever taken place. About our Earth, Carl Sagan wrote, quote, "To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known." My friends, let's write that story. The story when we realized that and started to act like that, no matter how long it takes, no matter how long and arduous the journey to get there. Because we can, if we will. To close, I'd like to share a remarkable recording of a piece created by the composer Eric Whitacre, who, for years before the pandemic, moved composers and cantors everywhere to create virtual choirs, has been bringing together singers from all over the world to make music. This piece is called Sing Gently, and it includes the voices and faces of an amazing 17,572 singers from 129 countries. The lyrics are simple. They say, "May we sing together always. May our voice be soft. May our singing be music for others, and may it keep others aloft. Sing gently always. Sing gently as one. May we stand together always. May our voice be strong. May we hear the singing, and may we always sing